Trump has conflated it with the fentanyl crisis, which really has nothing to do with Venezuela whatsoever. And in any case, the cocaine trafficking tends to go kind of from Colombia and Ecuador straight to the US. So it does feel like drugs is being used something as an excuse, as part of a kind of wider ploy to kind of push Maduro out and put the pressure on him.
Now, let's move on and cross stateside and say hello and welcome to the programme again. George Grylls, Times Washington correspondent. Hi to you, George.
Good afternoon.
Good to have you here, George. It's been so interesting to watch this story develop, the way, well, the Trump administration giving orders which have ended in the killing of at least 43 people in the Caribbean Sea. It's presented as part of the war on Venezuelan drug cartels and trafficking. I spoke earlier to the former State Department official, Karin von Hippel.
It's making a lot of people very nervous. These people aren't even given a trial. We don't know for sure they even have drugs. And so it's not entirely clear. They've moved an aircraft carrier to the region, and people are worried they might try to actually oust President Maduro by force, which, for a president who said he wasn't going to get involved in other people's business, that's a little bit rich.
So that's Karin von Hippel's view. What's your take on it, and how is it playing there in the USA, George? We've seen 43 people killed in military strikes on these boats crossing the Caribbean. No evidence given that they are in fact carrying drugs. And in the background, I read reports that inside the administration, anonymous sources are saying that what's this really about is getting rid of the leader of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro. Tell me your thoughts.
Well, that was something that President Trump promised to do during his first term. So if you remember back in 2019, I think it was, at the end of 2018, beginning of 2019, there was this kind of crisis in Venezuela where it looked like Maduro might be ousted, and the US basically, with Trump's approval, trying to kind of push him over the cliff, and it didn't work. So you could say that it's returning to old business here and trying to kind of force the issue in South America. And Trump has assembled this armada, really, in the Caribbean Sea that's now going to be bolstered by the USS Gerald R. Ford, which is the largest aircraft carrier that the US has, the biggest battleship in the world. It's absolutely ginormous. I've actually been on it. It's just extraordinary, the size of it. And it's not like they're lacking in firepower already, because they have a nuclear power submarine, they've got several destroyers, they've got more than enough to do serious damage to Venezuela, but this is just kind of upping the ante even more.
Right, so a mighty military force in the Caribbean, supposedly to be ready to fight drug trafficking, but those who think it's about regime change are going to say, look at that military force, that's surely what that's really, really all about. I mean, the administration, are they inhibited in defending what they're doing? I see no one on the record, of course, in the administration saying they mean to get rid of Maduro in this way, because it would also be a breach of international law. They don't care too much for the UN, I know, in Washington, but it would breach the UN Charter too.
Well, bear in mind they've put a $50 million bounty on Maduro's head, who is the president of Venezuela, and they've said he's illegitimate. They've said that he's the head of a drugs cartel, which some experts dispute whether or not it actually exists. Because bear in mind the kind of trafficking route that they're targeting, which is basically these kind of rickety boats going from Venezuela, usually to kind of Trinidad and Tobago in the Caribbean. Actually, a lot of the drugs that's being trafficked there it tends to be more of a route towards Europe, and it's kind of cocaine. And Trump has conflated it with the fentanyl crisis, which really has nothing to do with Venezuela whatsoever. And in any case, the cocaine trafficking tends to go kind of from Colombia and Ecuador straight to the US. So it does feel like drugs is being used something as an excuse, as part of a kind of wider ploy to kind of push Maduro out and put the pressure on him.
And George, something else I want to run past you and get your thoughts on. Donald Trump on Air Force One saying he would love to run for president in 2028. That would, of course, be against the US Constitution for him to seek a third term. He was speaking to reporters on his trip to Asia. I think we can hear that now. Unless we can't. There we go. Here it is.
Great people. I don't have to get into that, but we have one of them standing right here. We have JD, obviously. The vice president is great. I think Marco's great. I think, I'm not sure if anybody would run against us. I think if they ever formed a group, it would be unstoppable. I really do. I believe that. I would love to do it. I have my best numbers ever. It's very terrible. I have my best numbers. If you read it, am I not ruling it out? You'll have to tell me. All I can tell you is that we have a great group of people, which they don't.
Well, George, what do you think? He's teasing it a bit, isn't he, again?
I think he's being deliberately vague, and it's very hard to tell with Trump because he's such a slippery character. If that's about, whether he genuinely wants to kind of push the Constitution to a breaking limit at that point and run for third term, or it's because he's politically sensitive and he realizes the dangers of saying, no, I'm not running them, because all his authority drains away and people start looking towards 2028 and who will run for the Republicans, and suddenly that kind of affects his standing and his second term. So it could be a bit of both, to be honest. He may just be kind of thinking that's the most convenient answer at the time being for him, and then he'll make a decision closer to the time. But it is quite an extraordinary response.
It is. Joe Tanner and Matthew Lazarus here. Joe?
Yeah, I was just going to say, so Steve Bannon's been sort of putting himself about a bit, hasn't
Very
he?
explicitly, yeah.
Very much saying that he's involved. And I saw also the comment that I think it was put to Trump on Air Force One that he could run as VP, and that would be the way around the Constitution, which just this idea of sort of we're going to sort of find any possible way. Just to me seemed quite remarkable as a sort of an approach.
An international comparison for that in Russia, where Putin had to become prime minister for one term and needed to swap with the prime minister. Not
makes
a
you
great
wonder what's been going.
is it?
Makes
Absolutely.
you wonder what happened on those calls with Putin, whether they were discussing Ukraine or other tactics.
Oh yes, tactics on how to stay in office when you're constitutionally barred. I mean, it's extraordinary.
What do you think, Matthew?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just extraordinary to even contemplate. I mean, the other thing as well is he's going to be very, very old. If he was to get the Constitution changed. But this situation, I mean, he knows exactly what he's doing with this situation in the Caribbean, because basically he's treating it like a video game. They're going out to shoot the bad guys, they're going out to shoot drug traffickers, even if they're trafficking not the drug he's saying, and not to America but to Europe. But of course, the Democrats tried to pass a motion in the Senate to condemn it. A couple of Republican senators rebelled. But if you're in Main Street America, what are you going to think? You're going to think, he's getting rid of the bad guy and he knows exactly what he's doing. Never mind breaking international law. The video game says I'm on the side of the good guys. So it's just yet more cynicism that destroys his opponents.
Yeah, and George, there's a very recent precedent of another president who didn't seem to have realised he might be too old to run for office yet again, as Kamala Harris. Well, she was toying with the idea that maybe she regrets, I stress maybe, not saying something at the right time, George.
That's right. In her new book, she's kind of talked about how it wasn't really Biden's right to say that I can just keep going forever ad infinitum, that someone should have said to him, let's call it. You're pretty old. You're obviously a bit frail. This isn't the right time. If there is one thing that you could say about Trump, he may be old. He does not look frail. I mean, he's on this absolutely gargantuan trip again at the moment through Asia. And he seems to be indefatigable. He just keeps going. If for someone who's approaching 80, you have to say that he is, a picture of health is pretty energetic still.
Well, George, great to get your thoughts. Thank you so much for joining us. George Grylls there in Washington.